Thank you for having me. So I am a holistic health and nutrition specialist and also the vice president for a holistic nutrition company called NutriScribe. We help people all over the world to get to the root cause of their issues using new nutrition. And I've been in the health and wellness industry for about 6 years now. So one of the topics that we're talking about right now is going to be, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm excited for that.
Well, awesome. It's one of my favorite things too, because I believe it's one of the reasons that we created the company, Navan, and the product lineup that we have is really directed to heavy metals, heavy metal toxicity. And so I think maybe we could just start at a entry level, and maybe you could explain to people what are heavy metals.
Yeah, so heavy metals, and you heard this term thrown around a lot of times, but basically there are environmental toxins. So they're metals that are in the environment that can basically, when you are exposed to them, they can build up in your tissues. Now, there's a plethora of different types of metals, but the main ones that we talk about are lead, aluminum, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. And these heavy metals are very common in society. And I'm sure in a couple seconds, we'll get into really how they affect the body and also how they even get into the body in the first place.
Yeah, that's exactly where we want to go, because a lot of people, I think, don't even understand how the body is, how that toxicity gets into the body, and over the years, how the effect of it, what the effect of it is on the body. So if you don't mind, could you just, from your point of view, share with us the effects of toxicity and heavy metals on the body?
Yeah, so let's go. I think that probably the most common way or the easiest way for people to understand this would be like kind of like a magic school bus ride, right? So let's start at kind of like the root of where they kind of get into the body in the first place. So let's take 3 of the most common heavy metals that people are susceptible to, aluminum, mercury, and arsenic. So aluminum, you are basically, it gets into your tissues when you use stuff like aluminum foil or an antiperspirant that has aluminum in it, which that used to be very mainstream and common until we found out the negative effects of that seeping into your skin. Stuff like mercury, which can be basically taken in through the bigger fish like tuna, or like if you eat shark and stuff like that. I always say this wrong, so bear with me. Amalgam fillings, which are mercury fillings in your mouth. So those 2, aluminum, mercury, those are going to be the more common things that you hear. Arsenic is now coming up on the rise because people are now coming to find that actually rice is contaminated with arsenic a lot of the times. So as you're finding out here, as I'm explaining some of these things, these are very common practices that we essentially use on a day-to-day basis. And some of them are consuming food. Some of them are wrapping our food in them. And a lot of them are basically, we're over inundated by them because we're consuming them accidentally, right? So that becomes really a bigger issue down the road as they start to basically build up in the body.
Right, exactly. And that is kind of over time, they just continue to build up. And that's some of the effect of the drag that it puts on the body from a health standpoint. Can the body deal with those naturally? Is there a way for the body to function or get rid of, or how does the body deal with them? Because obviously we don't want them.
Yeah, exactly. So the cool thing about and I say the cool thing, but the really interesting thing about our body is that our body is literally a detoxing machine, right? So we have our kidneys, our liver, our intestines, our lungs, and then lastly, obviously, our skin. So our body has the ability to detox stuff out that comes in. And we see this with normal environmental chemicals as well, like PCBs, PBSs, the plastics, all of those other endocrine disruptors. But the issue becomes that our body, even though it is an amazing machine, it gets over inundated by these things. And when they start to, I want you to think of the system like kind of like you have a toxicity cup, right, in your body. Yeah. And you were filling up this cup every single day. And it may be from our beauty products. Some heavy metals are also found in beauty products as well, like lead. From our beauty products we put on every day, from the shampoo and conditioner we put on our hair, from the off-gassing of your furniture. And these are common things, not to necessarily scare people, but to help them become aware of how toxic our environment actually is. So this cup, this imaginary cup we have in our body is basically our total toxic load cup. And this cup gets filled up by all these different things, not just the heavy metals, but heavy metals and chemicals and pesticides alike. So what ends up happening is our body can only handle so much. There's a maximum capacity and a threshold, and that is different for every single one of us because we are all bio-individual. So that cup fills up to the top. And then once it fills up and starts to overflow, our body needs help, right? So once it starts to need help, and once this cup has overflown, symptoms start to persist. We start to notice skin rashes. We start to get digestive issues. We have brain fog. We just don't feel like ourselves. We start to notice that our hormones are going or negatively going down. That is when our body is basically saying, help me. What we don't want is to get to that point, right? I'm sure you've been there. I've been there where I'm like, why do I have all these symptoms?
Exactly.
Essentially because the toxic cup that we have in our body has overflown, and now we need some help. So I hope that made a little bit of sense in that little analogy that I had there.
It does. It does. And when that cup overfills and that load just gets too much, how does the body cope with that? What's the long-term effects of that happening if something doesn't intervene?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. And this is actually where people start to relate the most, because these are common ailments that people start to develop. So you just heard all of the symptoms that I talked about when it came to skin rashes, digestive distress, bloating, leaky gut, brain fog, all of those different things. So the long-term effects of these things are pretty bad, for lack of a better term. You think about endocrine disruption, right? And let's go back to the heavy metal situation. There's mercury and aluminum, and those heavy metals have the tendency to cause directly endocrine disruption in your body. Some of them affect the thyroid. Some of them, because it's so much stress on your body, it reduces the amount of thyroid hormone you are able to actually produce. They also are essentially there are antagonists to essential nutrients, minerals, proteins in your body that are essential for these reactions, these enzymatic reactions that go on your in your body on a day-to-day basis. So it starts to negatively affect the brain. They have done autopsies on people and basically taken portions of their brain and seen that there is aluminum and mercury buildup because mercury can cross the blood-brain barrier. So all of these things, including displacing of minerals, like I just discussed, weakness, just feeling overall weak. You can get hair loss. Hair loss is a very common thing from being over inundated by heavy metals and having them build up in your tissues. So these start to get really serious, especially over time with the overflowing of that toxic cup we just talked about. So that's why we have to become more aware of our environment and actually of detoxing the body, right?
How important do you think, just wrap this up, but how important do you think, and is there an age where it becomes more prevalent, or is this something that happens, from birth? Or is it just an amount of time it builds up and accumulates and overflows, and then we are what we are, where we are?
No, I think that's a great question too. And mainly I want to bring up, there was a study that was done called the 10 Americans study. And for those of you who are watching, I really condone you to go ahead and Google this, because it was so interesting and also frightening at the same time to hear about how they tested these 10 Americans, and they found that there was 232, I believe it was, toxins were found in the umbilical cords of US newborns. Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is because from a very small age, now that we've had not a very small amount of regulation in our society when it comes to the chemicals that are put in, the chemicals that are put in our foods, the chemicals that, the heavy metals that are building up in stuff like where they grow the rice. So in our rice, and our body's ability to essentially not be able to empty that toxin cup as often, it starts to get worse and worse as the generations continue to go forward. So normally, to answer your question, this would be a problem that would happen as you get older. But because people are now born toxic, it becomes more necessary as at a younger age. And I would say probably you start to experience these symptoms in your 20s, but maybe you've been dealing with toxicity since you were a little kid. Mm-hmm. So that's very crucial to understand too.
I thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to do this for us, and just appreciate you joining us on the call. Thank you so much.